I've learned a lot about like leading with empathy from little things, especially teaching boys. I had a little boy who did his work on an exercise ball in the back of the room because he literally was driven by a motor. And I was like, oh, I understand what that means now. Okay, sit on this ball and get out your wiggles that you need to get out, but it's not going to impede you from learning. Let me change my expectations of what I feel like my classroom should be like to accommodate you. And it didn't mean lowering a bar. It meant shifting. Yeah. This is actually going to help you be more successful.
The Catch Fire Show. Welcome back to Catch Fire Show. I'm your host, Simon Yost, and this week we're joined by Keina Newell. I met Keina in St. Louis in 2009, 2010-ish, when she was in the Teach for America Corps with my wife, and watched them go through some of the hardest professional years of their lives learning how to teach in St. Louis City. We all learned a lot together. We spent a lot of time together, and it was very much of an honor for me to see up close how these folks poured themselves out to their students and even to other teachers who might have been very fearful at that point in their careers, and how these younger professionals injected some energy into the schools that were trying to get reaccredited and trying to find some footing. So have a lot of good memories about that time. And then thought of Keina because she has taken a turn since teaching, and she's now pivoted to doing her own company. And again, I think that's a good model for people to imitate when you're looking to switch careers. What do you look for, and how do you find your way there? And I think Keina is a great example of that, because when you talk to her now, and as you'll hear on the show, she's more of Keina than she's ever been, and she's not losing her identity or her way by doing her own company. But yet, as you can hear in the interview, there's themes that go through not only her professional career switch, but also from her childhood that extend to what she's doing now and just make her more and more herself. So excited for you to hear from Keina, and we'll be back with her right after this. Okay. Keina, thanks for joining us today all the way from DC. So we're starting to shake it up a little bit, getting some other states represented in the mix.
I'm happy to contribute.
Some people think that everything starts and ends in St. Louis, and I'm like, maybe you have gooey butter cake, but a lot of other stuff.
Are you from St. Louis, Simon?
No.
Okay, all right.
I mean, we've been here about a decade now, so I'm just like, everybody's toasted rav is a good example. Toasted ravioli. Mm-hmm. St. Louisans would say that they, invented toasted ravioli.
Okay.
I don't know. But Seattle would say they invented spicy tater tots. I don't know if either of those things could be claimed as, I don't know. So we met up with you when you were in St. Louis doing the Teach for America Corps. What do you find yourself doing now in DC?
So now I am a financial coach after being in education. Gosh, I joined the Corps in 2007, and then I stayed in education for over a decade. And 2 years ago, I was like, hey, I'm going to bet on myself and start a business.
Wow. And was that just something you had a inkling about one day, and then the next day you were doing it, or was it something you'd thought about for a while?
What's so funny is if you had asked me 3 years ago or told me, Keina, you're going to start a business, I would have laughed and rolled my eyes at you. And the thing that's true and has always been true is that I knew whatever role that I wanted coming out of college, which like even going to Teach for America, I never wanted to be a teacher. I'll go on record and say that. I always joke and say God has a sense of humor, because I have like essays from college that outline where I'm supposed to be in 5 years, and none of them included teaching. In terms of like my business, I was thinking about what I really enjoyed about teaching, and I was also a vice principal, and what did I enjoy about like coaching teachers. And it's really about the transformation. But then there was also another question I started to ask myself was, if you could do anything for free, what would it be? Thinking about what are your natural born like talents and assets. And I love budgeting and talking about finances, which is something that like people do not like. That's very taboo. And so Actually, I was at church what is it, 2018? I was at church earlier in the year. I had wrote down some notes because I actually went to school for management and finance. And so a lot of my friends are like accountants and like in the business world, corporate America. And I'm the one that took this road less traveled. And I was writing down some notes about how I thought it'd be really cool to do financial education. I shared the notes with a friend, and yeah, a couple months later, I was like, hey, I'm not going back to my job. And then that's where I am right now.
Yeah. And then again, you don't have to tell us the whole thing in a summary because hopefully we can dig into it. But like overall, the last 2 years, has it been a roller coaster or something that's been generally you felt like successful or?
I will tell you that literally I started my business in terms of asking a couple of questions. As I said, I had no plans on starting a business. I had spent the last year being a vice principal at an elementary school. And I was like, I love the work, but I also want to be rejuvenated in a different way. And one of my good girlfriends, she was like, yeah, go ahead, claim your domain name. And so I felt like Field of Dreams, like if you build it, they will come. All these people in my circle are hyping me up and I'm like, woo, start a business. And you built it. And I was like, okay, so where are the people? That's not, you don't just magically have clients. And over the past 2 years, it's definitely been a journey, one that I wouldn't like trade at all. Like I've learned a lot about myself. I've had, I think 3 or 4 business coaches. And so it has not been a linear journey, but it has definitely been one that's continued to propel me forward to go from a place where you're like, maybe I could charge someone for this to I definitely can charge someone for this, and getting to a point where you realize I can actually live off of this thing. And I'm like, I've built something that people pay attention to.
Yeah. So you're in college. This is going back. Sorry. You're in college. You're writing essays about, I don't know, 5-year plan, 10-year plan.
Yeah.
I don't know. Might have had a Gucci bag in there or something. I'm not sure. That's a joke. But like you're writing your plan. It doesn't have to do with teaching. And then somehow TFA comes, which I understand from knowing some people that have done TFA, which is what Teach for America, the acronym. That's enough. I feel like TFA is like the acronym, the folks with the most acronyms. Like it was like a bunch of people that got together and they like, how can we have the most acronyms possible? Anyway, but some people that are in the TFA space, I understand that there's like a why there, that they want to serve. And some people maybe view it as a bridge. How did you view it when you were getting into it?
Interestingly enough, when I was in college, I was very much student government, student leader on campus. And I had gone to a conference called Big 12 Student, what was it called? Black Student Government, I think it was. And so it was basically a convening of Black student associations at predominantly white institutions. And so I went to the University of Tulsa, which is a small private school in Oklahoma, very few Black students. And in going to these conferences, like you meet different people. Teach for America was like one of the sessions or something that they had. And this was my freshman year, I think, of college. I went all 4 years, but my freshman year, I remember attending some like presentation. I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And to go and teach. So I used to have an expandable file, and I would put like all the opportunities that I learned about it, because that's just like type A person I am. So I was like, oh, I'm going to put this in my file, along with a fellowship for Cancer Treatment Centers of America, like all of these different things. Like I said, I went to school to like, first I wanted to be a pediatrician. Nothing has gone as planned. But the education, I don't know why I couldn't see it, because as a child, like I babysat. It's really the only job I ever had prior to like really being an adult. I had my own babysitting business. And then my mom actually worked at a school. And so I used to go and volunteer at the school. Like I loved that. Like I loved education. When I went to college, I started an organization for minority students that were coming, like a mentorship program. So they came to college and you don't know how to navigate the space. Which classes should I take? Do I really need this book? How can I like overcome failing an essay that nobody has actually taught me how to write? So everything aligned with Teach for America. And then my senior year, like I told you, I had this expandable file folder, which included applying to grad schools, applying to jobs. I applied to Teach for America. I did early decision. I was really hopeful that they would actually deny me. So that way I could say I applied and I could just cross it off and say, oh, they rejected me. It's okay. And so I think that was like, I also chose all my cities for Teach for America based on where I could go to grad school afterwards. So I chose St. Louis because WashU was there. And I had actually accepted a job in the oil and gas industry prior to hearing back from Teach for America. And I was like, and then they placed me in middle school math. I interviewed for elementary. And I was like, sorry, guys, I can't teach math. But they kept calling me. And I just felt really compelled. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go do this for 2 years. You can do anything for 2 years. I rescinded my acceptance with this oil and gas company, committed to doing the 2 years for Teach for America. After I did the 2 years, I was like, oh my goodness, if not me, then who? And so, yeah, over a decade later, I was still in education. And once again, I wouldn't change anything about it. I definitely wonder what would happen if I took the oil and gas job or didn't continue teaching after the 2 years, but that's my story. You asked me a small question and I gave you
this is great. This is exactly what we should be talking about. We're right on track. So you're teaching, and we could probably talk for an episode or two at length about education in America. Mm-hmm. We probably don't want to take up that much time because people probably are tired of hearing about all that. But one thing that I think is probably familiar to you is there's this idea called the achievement gap. Mm-hmm. And there's some people that might be on both sides of it. There's some people that might be like, this is a very real thing. And there's some people that might not see it, basically. It might be invisible to them. And so just as you've lived it in multiple major cities in America, how would you shed some light on what that gap is and how you've seen it?
I think, too, I feel like the language has shifted to the opportunity gap, right? There's an opportunity for students in underserved communities, specifically Black and Brown students. And even going back to college, without needing to be in some metropolis city. I'm from Oklahoma. I'm specifically from Edmond, Oklahoma, which is a very affluent town, predominantly white suburb. And Oklahoma is definitely a white, brown, Black segregated area where you'll hear people talk about, oh, that's the Black side of town, the white side of town, et cetera. And our parents, I was fortunate enough where my parents, even though they grew up in predominantly Black cities by way of growing up in the 50s, my parents realized how important education was. Both of my parents were in the military. And so they made strategic moves for us to be in certain schools. And my mom was always researching those pieces. And I can tell you I went to a school in Edmond called Cross Timbers Elementary. And I don't even think I realized how much plays a part in education as a child. But as I reflect back on it, I can see all of these missed opportunities. And I was a quote unquote smart child who had parents who advocated for her. And we moved from Florida to Oklahoma, and I had been in a number of different schools. And so I moved to Edmond when I was in 4th grade, and my mom had me tested for gifted, talented, et cetera. And they decided, I stayed in the 4th grade curriculum, but I was given the opportunity to go to 5th grade math. And I remember very vividly them telling me, if you're learning something new in 4th grade math, you can go ahead and stay in 4th grade math and not go to the 5th grade math class. At some point in the curriculum, I decided that whatever I was learning in 4th grade math was new. It was probably something about geometry, which is always at the end of the math books. But I ended up getting kicked out of, if you will, 5th grade math for not attending. And I don't think I ever told my mom, or I told her after the fact. But as an adult, I reflect on the fact that I was 9 years old, and no teacher ever called home to say, hey, I haven't seen Keina. And I do wonder, had I been a white child, because I was one of 3 Black students in my grade, what would have the conversation been? Because I was capable of doing the work. I literally went on the advice of whatever they told me, which was like to stay in the 5th grade math class. And I saw that at multiple points play out as I reflect back on my own education, even thinking about like some of the opportunities that I maybe wasn't or was exposed to. I don't remember college counselors really talking about college or Keina, here's these scholarships, etc. And I don't know what conversations were with other kids, but I do know that there were different expectations. And I pushed that forward to say that then when I got to college, I noticed the achievement gap because there were other kids around me that couldn't write an essay, which like had just been a basic expectation where I grew up and like the school system that I was a part of. And so just to think about like, how can you make it to college without knowing how to write like a 5-page paper? And that's one of the reasons I started the organization, and it was called Leaders Incorporated. Like I started that organization because I was watching from my freshman year in the fall semester to the spring semester, I was watching minority students drop out of college. And that's not their fault, in my opinion. It's like opportunities that haven't been extended to them. And I would say those are the same things that I see in education today. I worked at KIPP for a number of years and I learned a lot, but even within that dynamic with some of my other colleagues, like the whole KIPP mantra, especially when I was there in like early 2009, it was like KIPP through college, climb the mountain to college. And in affluent areas, like college just is the expectation. It's not, we're not having that conversation about making it to college. And the narrative is just completely different. The opportunities that are presented to kids are completely different. And it breaks my heart because of the things that like, there's some underlying like beliefs that people hold about the kids that they serve. Everything from like the work that you put in front of kids, whether or not you choose to give kids feedback, et cetera. And I'm not saying that there's not a place for sensitivity. Like having been here in DC, I actually lost a student. A former student of mine someone sent me a news article, was actually recently gunned down almost about a week ago, and a 16-year-old. And so I realized that as I think about the kids and families that I've served for over a decade, that there are a lot of barriers outside of the classroom that we like need to address. But at the same time, like within the classroom, like our kids need to be given the same opportunity that like if you went to Sidwell, or if you lived in a different zip code where mom and dad drove a Suburban and like you played soccer after school, just like the whole narrative is different. So it's something that exists. And I really struggle on how to shift the outcomes for students, because I feel like we're like trying to fit, what is that, a square peg in a circular hole or whatever that analogy is. And especially now in the midst of this pandemic where, just take school and just Zoom them and they'll make it. But I really think that there has to be a different level of innovation that we bring to education. And also like for Black and brown children, first off, Industrial Revolution education was created, and it was not created for the Black and brown children that it serves. And so like, first we need to acknowledge that. And having been in education for so long, I realized that our kids bring these like innate abilities that we're not tapping into. And that's on us as educators.
A hard part is that we're still at this awareness level. And I'm sure that it's 1,000 more times frustrating for you than it is for me. But I'm just like, what, are you serious that you don't see that there's a difference? Like that people are, I don't know, it's not even slipping through the cracks. It's like, there's no slipping. There's just like a crack. So I think that we've faced that with cultural changes even in our family. And I just wondered if you have any thoughts on that, being around so many different families and in different communities as you're teaching. Teachers can do so much. The community needs to come around them. And then, like you're saying, not every community is going to look the same. Coupled with awareness, as people become aware, what can they do to lean in?
I think one of the questions I always thought about was like, would you make that decision for your own child? And I don't think you have to know everything to be able to answer that question at a basic level for yourself.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when I was in St. Louis Public Schools that one of the decisions they made was the kids that had been retained one or more times were like bumped up to their like appropriate grade. And I was like livid. I'm like 23 years old and I'm like fuming. And I'm sure like my perspective as a 23-year-old and what St. Louis Public Schools was their perspective, there were me being so young, there was probably things that I didn't understand, but right, would you make that same decision for your own kids? Because I know for a fact, I remember there was a young guy, his name was Melvin, and I taught him in 6th grade. And I felt that was probably the first time that he felt successful as a student. And yes, there were gaps, but like I was watching him like grow and develop in a number of different ways. And then the next year he was in 9th grade. So you go from 6th to 9th. And it was frustrating for me because I was like, he's going to fall through the cracks. Like he's done, especially because of the things that like there wasn't a support system to wrap around for those kids. Like to really think about what is the purpose and what is the intent? What are some like consequences, unintentional or intentional, of these decisions? And like really being able to understand all those dynamics. And so I know that you may not be able to get everything right, but how do we make sure that we're doing as much as we can, that we're trying to make the most critical moves and decisions so our kids have the best opportunities? And then I think outside of that, and I'm not by any means on the policy side of things, but there are different layers to like the oppression and the systemic racism. Like I just think about for my kids in reflecting on one of the students that, like I mentioned, that passed last week, I was like, dang, he had so many different obstacles to go through before he ever got into the school building. And that's, he had a single mom, homelessness, and then there's gun violence. Like the things that my kids experienced, even though we had the same skin color, I couldn't say, oh, I understand. I don't understand what it's like to be in a neighborhood where on any given point in time, you could have bullets ricochet through your bedroom. Like I couldn't say that I could relate to that.
Those felt needs, like even we lived by the Botanical Gardens for several years in St. Louis, and this one kiddo lived with his grandma one summer. We had never met him. I don't even know if we ever met his grandma. And he just was like walking by one day and says hi to us like he's known us our whole life. And before we even know what's up, he's like in our house, in our fridge. We're like, okay.
Yeah.
And it felt like a Dennis the Menace situation. So he must have moved, back somewhere else during the school year or whatever. Zoom ahead over a year later, Alyssa moves up to Riverview Gardens, and she's like a coach for teachers. So she wasn't even supposed to be an administrator, but this kid is supposedly terrorizing these teachers. They can't get anything done. And so they're finally like, we're going to go take him to Miss Yost, which was not even what they should have done because she wasn't even an administrator. But they bring this kid in, and it's this kid that was like our Dennis the Menace. And he went from this horror to like immediately like just, Miss Yost, how are you? And and just immediately changed to this kid. And they're like, what did you do? They looked at Alyssa like she's a superhero, and she's, I fed him. Like, I fed him. Like that. And that for me, that was just one of those things, like just my mind was just like, oh my gosh. Like,
yeah. I think it's so important I've learned a lot about like leading with empathy from like little things, especially teaching boys, which I'm like, whew, God bless. Like observing myself in a meeting where I'm like talking, I'm off task, but I'm on task. And so that helped me be reflective. I had a little boy who did his work on an exercise ball in the back of the room because he literally was like, on those ADHD surveys, it says driven by a motor. And I was like, oh, I understand what that means now. Okay, sit on this ball and get out your wiggles that you need to get out, but it's not going to impede you from learning. Let me change my expectations of what I feel like my classroom should be like to accommodate you. And it didn't mean lowering a bar. It meant like shifting. Yeah. This is actually going to help you be more successful. And so to your point of he needed food, it's like, how often are we connecting with families and understanding the community we serve, especially when you have like white teachers coming in to these underserved communities, and you're not even taking the time to get to know your students. I always told teachers that I connected with that your students have as much to teach you as you do to teach them.
Preach.
And so when you can come in at that level of humility, I think it allows you to serve more. And so the parents are the experts on their children. And so you need to be listening to your kids, getting to know them, realizing that some of your kids, like, their cup is so full by the time that they see you. If you say the wrong thing, it's over. And because you don't know that they just had to get 4 siblings dressed. They don't have furniture at home. They don't have electricity at home. And in the different years of me, like, serving in different roles, taking kids home, loving on a lot of different kids and understanding different families, like, I learned to lead from like that place of empathy. And that was the thing that I also had to teach teachers too, because I get it. You want to be in control, but unfortunately you're not getting very far being in control. You got to listen to those experts that are in front of you. And that doesn't come from a textbook.
Yes. Yeah. And just to let everybody in, there's not a right answer to this question. So just give us the vibe, like, going back to the exercise ball and the kiddo on the exercise ball, if you would have had the space and if you would have had exercise balls for every student, I'm just curious, do you think you could have facilitated that for many students, or is that impossible?
Not every kid needed it.
Okay.
So for this one little guy, it was like, literally, it was, just imagine like in a cartoon where you see like you pour the soda and the bubbles come up. Like, he's that carbonation. And he was a brilliant mind. So it was like, how do I best serve him? And gosh, I can't remember. I was probably like 4 years into teaching at that point. And so I was getting creative on like, how do I support him and what he needs? And for another kid, it could have been like, don't tell any other teachers, but you can chew gum in my class, because you just needed some kind of like oral fixation or whatever it is. And so for my classroom, it was really about, how do you create this community too, where kids understand that fair isn't always equal. And not, I think that's the saying, isn't it? See, I should probably
say it one more time.
Like, fair isn't always equal in terms of, right, like, maybe not everybody's getting gum, but like, it's that picture that you see where kids are standing on different boxes, and you have, like, when we're thinking about equity, and I want to be able to make sure that all of my kids have this like access. And so everybody has a different prescription and a different recipe. And so how do I make sure that everybody gets the ingredients that they need so they get access to what it is that they need? Because the other kids would have looked at me and been like, Miss, no, I'm not sitting on that exercise ball. That's for babies or whatever.
Yeah.
I
want to be a baby.
Yeah.
So fair isn't always equal. I like that. That's a good bumper sticker too.
I feel like that is a saying. I don't think I just made it up.
Either way, that'll preach, so to speak. Can we shift back to your business then real quick? Or not quick necessarily, but so we talked about, it seemed like you had some experience even starting some organizations in college or something like that. Sometimes people in academia, maybe there's a aspect to starting that they've never used those muscles before. It sounds like you had, but how would you then describe some of the barriers and challenges you had to transition into the business community and do your own venture?
I think the biggest barrier is like belief in self, actually, because I think we all have a natural desire to know the how, especially as adults. One of the things that's been fun for me to reflect on, when I told you I would have never had a business, but literally that's all I did as a kid. Like, I had a lemonade stand. I had a babysitting business, literally with legit business cards. In college, I actually found this past weekend, I forgot that I did this, but like, I had a business plan and I did a business plan pitch competition. Like, all roads led to this point. And I think the difference when I was like younger is nobody told me that I couldn't do it. Versus like when you get older, people are like, are you sure that's what you want to do? Most businesses fail, or there's all these like naysayers.
Yeah, that weren't when you were younger, nobody told you that you couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because when you're young, ask little kids what they want to be. And they're like, I want to be a firefighter, a ballerina, and like a baseball player. And as an adult, you're like, you can't be all those things, but you don't tell the little kid, like, you can't be all those things. And so you have this ability to dream. And I think the same was true even in college. There was an ability to dream and like, for at least for myself, and feeling like I could change the world. And then you get into the real world, if you will, and you get into this like monotony of what is. And I definitely started to feel that. And I was yearning for like my 5-year-old self that is like creative in that way. And you just can't tell me that I can't do something because I can. So I would definitely say the biggest barrier is like that belief in self. And as a business owner, the thing that's actually helped me the most is like mindset work. And it's something that I hadn't really explored or heard of. But one of my coaches that I've been working with for about the last year, she is the one who actually introduced me more to mindset work. And it's really having this thought and realization that like my thoughts actually create my results. And so you gotta push through certain things and change basically your thought or your perception on whatever that circumstance is in front of you to get the results that you desire.
So does that just look puffing yourself up, just like, I'm awesome, I'm awesome, I'm awesome? Or what is that?
Yeah, it's not woo and fluffy like that. I guess you could do that. I would say like on a basic level, it actually started too with one of my other business coaches. She sent me some like money affirmation cards that said things like, I'm full of money making ideas, or things come easily to me. And so that's how it started originally, like adopting someone else's thoughts. But then there's a mindset practice called the model, and you'll take a circumstance, whatever it may be. It could be like how you feel about your full-time job, your business, etc., and sitting down and writing down like all of your thoughts on that specific thing, the circumstance. And so what you want to be able to identify is which of those thoughts are intentional thoughts, in other words, like they serve you, and which ones are unintentional, meaning they don't serve you. And you break it down even more where you isolate each thought and you attach it to a feeling. So how does that thought make you feel? Ideally, you want good feelings to come from your thoughts, but realizing that we have thoughts that don't serve us and they create negative emotion, whether that's like, I'm scared or I'm confused, I'm frustrated. And so being able to identify what actions do you take from that place, or what actions do you not take from that place, and how is that creating the current result in front of you? So for myself in business, it could have been anything from I haven't signed any clients, I haven't made any money, nobody's reading my emails, whatever that looks like. And so a lot of my thought work, in the last, definitely I will say like in the pandemic, was like coaching myself that like my business wasn't going to fall apart. Like everybody's running around and screaming that the sky is falling. It's pretty true that the sky is falling, but being able to coach yourself that it's not falling and everything's going to be okay.
Sometimes on the show, we ask people to talk about what they like, how they're showing up currently in the world in this formula, who they serve, how they serve, and then what they need to serve. We've talked about the what a little bit, the skills that you had developed from school, and then your love of accounting and budgeting. How would you talk about the who that you serve?
So I serve professional women, and I also serve solopreneurs. So it's like all of those type A women that are like, I have all areas of my life figured out, except for when it comes to my finances. And going back to that money is taboo thing, I love it when people are like, I'm not good at math. And I was like, great, well, I was a math teacher, so we're going to fix that. But yeah, I would say whether it's a professional woman or or I'm working with a solopreneur, my role is to help them create like new possibilities with their money. So learning how to save consistently, pay down debt, learning how to invest in themselves, and doing that without the financial stress or like having to worry, am I doing the right thing with my money?
And then going to the how, are you primarily doing the coaching, or do you help do the books and stuff as well?
No, so I don't do any accounting or bookkeeping. That's a different numbers team. What I do specifically is like I work with people in one-to-one coaching. And what I do is making sure like everything starts with helping people understand what they value in life and financially. From there, identifying their goals and then attaching their values and their goals to how they spend their money, whether that's how they spend it personally or how they spend it within their business. One of the things I'll just say on the business side, that if you're on social media, people are like, I want to make $10,000 a month. And I'm like, okay, if you spend $9,000 in expenses, the $10,000 isn't going to do anything for you, right? Like it's now just an arbitrary number, and something that you created, but you didn't have any plan. So with business owners, I'm really helping them like, let me think about how much revenue I want to generate. How will that revenue serve me in terms of me putting aside money for taxes? Because tax season shouldn't be stressful. Saving within my business, making purchases within my business, but ultimately planning to pay myself as well. And then I would say similarly on the business side, it's helping people realize that it's not about making more money. You can make $30,000 a year or $300,000 a year, and whatever habits you have will follow you. And so helping people create that spending plan to say, here's how I'm planning to spend my money, and here's how I can use my money as a tool to serve me in my life.
That is, yeah, we all need that. These are things that are really important. Okay. Well, is it okay if we put like your website link and stuff in the show notes for the podcast? Okay.
Sure.
So we'll do that for everybody so they can find you. And then closing thoughts, like people, if they're aspiring to launch their own thing, or as they're coming up from being students to contributing professionally, what words of advice might you have for them?
I would say if you are looking to invest in yourself and do something for yourself in terms of the business, like my mantra right now is do it scared. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a plan though, at the same time. Like understand, make calculated risk is what I like to call them. One of the things for me as a business owner is understanding if you are deciding I want to work for myself or leave my role, what does that actually look like in terms of how would you pay yourself? What are the things that your employers provide for you that maybe you're not thinking about, like healthcare, retirement? You may make $30,000 a year, but then when you factor in health insurance and retirement, it's another like $15,000, $20,000. And it's not to say that you can't do that for yourself, but one of the things that have to be debunked for people is like, oh, I make $30,000 a year. So if I make $30,000 in my business, I'll have made more money. No, joke's on you. That's if you have really tight expenses. But what you probably would need to do in your business is you would actually need to make $60,000 because you got to set aside money for your business and then pay yourself. And that's assuming that you are sound financially. So just really thinking about what is your plan? Do you know your numbers on the personal side? So you do have that agency and the freedom to make shifts when you desire. So I would say of all the advice I could give is that get a spending plan, understand what your personal expenses are, and make sure that you like start saving, even if you're saving $10 a month. Great. Eventually it'll be 20, 30, 100, 500. And then that is going to put you in a position, especially if you're like on the younger end and you're listening to this, then, 10 years from now, you have a lot more influence in like where you desire to go, because money isn't going to be the thing that holds you back.
This is really good. Well, thanks for spending time with us today. I really appreciate it. This has been really helpful for me, and I'm sure several others.
You're welcome. I feel like we talked about a lot of things that hopefully all comes together.
And if not, we'll have you back.
Money and education.
Yep. Thanks, Keina.
You're welcome.
I'm so thankful for Keina for joining us today. Things that stood out to me were her idea of fair but not equal, and just that idea that whether you call it differentiated learning or however you think about it, that we really are going to love people the best when we're trying to be fair to them, but not just trying to do everything the exact same way. Learned a lot from Keina. And I'm glad that you all could meet her and hear from her as well. If you enjoyed the podcast today, please consider leaving us a review on whatever platform you're listening on. A few clicks with some stars and some words means a lot. That's how people discover podcasts. So we'd love that. Until next time, I'm your host, Simon Yost. Music was provided by TP7 Productions, and this podcast was recorded, edited, and produced in St. Louis, Missouri. We'll see you next time.